Welcome to This Explainer. So, what if I told you that building a new school or a hospital isn't an act of generosity or charity, but an absolute, strict legal demand? Today, we're diving into one of the most transformative, yet honestly least understood ideas in African development. We are completely shifting how we view government services, public finance, and the very definition of progress, moving away from old, outdated models of aid and toward a system built entirely on human dignity. Section 1. From Charity to Justice, Reimagining Development. To really wrap our heads around this shift, I want you to ask yourself for a second. What if poverty wasn't just, a lack of money in your pocket? What if unemployment wasn't just some economic hiccup or personal failure, but actually a symptom of a much deeper, systemic failure of justice? Imagine if hunger, homelessness, or, say, a lack of quality education were no longer brushed off as just unfortunate realities or bad luck. What if they were literally recognized as direct violations of fundamental human rights? It totally flips the script, doesn't it? We stop asking for sympathy and we start demanding accountability. And that is where this concept comes in. Rights-based development completely redefines what progress means. It strips away the whole idea of development being a charitable act or foreign aid or a political favor doled out just in time for an election. Instead, it turns it into a strict constitutional obligation. Governments aren't building clinics because they're feeling generous that day. They're building them because the law absolutely demands it. Think about the sheer contrast here. Traditional development usually asks, how much aid do we need, and measures success by counting up the physical projects completed. It basically views citizens as passive beneficiaries of charity. But the rights-based approach, it measures justice. It asks, whose rights are being ignored? In this model, the government is the primary duty bearer. Development literally ceases to be charity and becomes justice. And citizens, they are no longer passive receivers. They are active rights holders. Section 2. The African Rights Perspective, Indivisible Rights. Now, this isn't just some imported concept. It is deeply, deeply rooted right here in African legal architecture. Africa actually possesses one of the world's most progressive human rights systems, anchored by the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Unlike a lot of Western frameworks that tend to separate political freedoms from economic realities, the African Charter completely rejects that false distinction. It treats civil, political, economic, social, cultural, and people's rights as totally indivisible. Basically, you just can't have one without the other. Think about it like this. You absolutely cannot claim to have a functioning democracy while millions of your citizens are going hungry, right? You can't just build shiny new highways while actively violating the human dignity of the people living right next to those roads. True development and human rights are, without a doubt, two sides of the exact same coin. Section 3. Kenya's Constitutional Transformation, the Ultimate Blueprint. Let's see how this philosophy actually became a legally binding reality. The Constitution of Kenya, which passed in 2010, fundamentally transformed the nation's governance. It explicitly guarantees comprehensive socioeconomic rights under Article 43. We are not just talking about abstract pie-in-the-sky laws here. We're talking about guaranteed access to clean water, housing, food, equitable education, and even social security. And the massive game-changing leap here is that these aren't just nice-to-have aspirations. They are legally enforceable rights, which means every county government and every single ministry is effectively transformed into a human rights institution. Actually, when you think about it, every single national and county budget becomes a human rights document that has to be measured against those very specific guarantees. Section 4. Rethinking Everyday Governance, Rights in Practice. So, what does it actually look like when we redesign an entire government around human rights? Well, we stop counting mere physical projects and start measuring real human impact. Agriculture is no longer just about pushing up crop yields. It's about guaranteeing the fundamental right to adequate food. Education isn't just counting how many concrete classrooms were built. It's guaranteeing real access and quality. We stop high-fiving over kilometers of paved roads and start measuring how many citizens actually gained access to true economic opportunity. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, practically speaking, can a citizen actually claim these services? Like, can you just demand decent work as a foundation for participating in democracy? Or mental and maternal health care as an absolute right? Under this legal framework, the answer is a resounding yes. Because, again, these are constitutional mandates, not political favors. Section 5. financing rights and civic duty, from politics to justice. And this brings us to the sometimes harsh reality of budgeting, because budgets are exactly where the rubber meets the road. Try thinking of a national budget not as some massive, boring spreadsheet, but as the moral compass for a country. Under a rights-based approach, public finance has to shift away from political maneuvering. Every single budget cycle must constantly ask, whose rights are being financed here? And even more crucially, which vulnerable populations are still being excluded from the pie? Of course, writing rights into law isn't some magic wand. We still face massive hurdles on the ground. Things like weak accountability, corruption, elite capture of resources, and just generally weak institutions. It's a tough reality check. Legal rights only truly exist when everyday citizens understand them, demand them, and actively defend them. And that means rights-based development absolutely demands an active, awake citizenry. It requires taking some very specific steps. Citizens have to understand their constitutional rights, first and foremost. Then they need to actually show up and participate in public budgeting, demand real transparency, be willing to litigate in court when those rights are violated, and build strong, peaceful civic movements. The government might hold the duty, but make no mistake, the citizen holds the power to enforce it. Ultimately, this is our core takeaway for today. True development isn't measured by massive dams, GDP growth, or shiny skyscrapers popping up in the capital city. It is measured by sustainable, inclusive justice. It's measured by whether every child can actually learn, whether every family has enough to eat, and if every community can live with dignity. To put it simply, development is not a favor bestowed by governments. It's the strict fulfillment of obligations owed to every single citizen. And finally, rights-based development isn't just about what's happening today. It's about tomorrow. We have to consider intergenerational equity. Are we exhausting our forests and water resources right now? Are we investing enough in our children's future? We really have to step back and ask ourselves, are our current policies, our mounting debts, and our climate actions leaving every future generation better off? Or are we simply stealing from their rights just to fund our present?